They thought fire would silence her. She used it to light the way home. Nebraska Territory, 1876 inches. The flames reached for her before she heard the riders. Kitty Morgan smelled kerosene 3 seconds before the barn door exploded inward, showering splinters across her face. She dropped the bridle and ran for the back exit, but 2 men blocked it already, their faces hidden behind red bandanas. The 3rd man threw the torch. It tumbled through the air like a falling star, trailing black smoke, and landed in the hay pile where she'd been standing moments before. The dry prairie grass ignited instantly, a wall of orange heat that separated her from any escape route. The men didn't say a word. They just watched through the growing inferno, waiting for her to burn. Katie grabbed a saddle blanket and soaked it in the water trough, wrapping it around her shoulders as the fire climbed the wooden beams overhead. Smoke filled her lungs, thick and choking. The horses screamed in their stalls, kicking at the doors. She couldn't leave them. Her father had taught her that much before the cholera took him last spring. A ranch hand who abandons horses deserves whatever the prairie gives them, and the prairie gives nothing but dust and death. She moved through the smoke, unlatching stalls by feel, her eyes streaming tears. 4 horses thundered past her toward the front entrance where the fire burned hottest. She heard them scream, heard their hooves on burning wood, then heard nothing but the roar of flames. The 5th horse, a gray mare named Dust, stood frozen in her stall, too terrified to move. Katie grabbed her mane and pulled, cursing in words her mother would have slapped her for. The roof beam cracked above them, showering embers like deadly snow. They burst through the side wall together, horse and woman breaking through weakened boards in an explosion of splinters and smoke. Katie hit the ground hard, rolling through dirt and ash, the wet blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. Dust bolted into the darkness. The 3 men sat on their horses 50 yards away, silhouettes against the burning barn. One of them raised his hand, pointing at her. They kicked their mounts forward. She ran. The Nebraska prairie stretched endlessly in every direction, no cover except the tall grass that would hide her for maybe 30 seconds before they rode her down. Her lungs burned worse than the fire she'd escaped. Behind her, hoofbeats drummed the earth like thunder, getting closer with each heartbeat. She veered left toward the creek bed, praying the water would slow them, praying for anything that might give her another minute of life. The lead rider closed the distance, his lasso spinning overhead, the loop widening as he prepared to throw. Katie could hear him breathing, could smell his horse's sweat mixing with the smoke that clung to her clothes. Then she saw it, the old buffalo wallow, invisible in the darkness until you were right on top of it. She dove left at the last second, hitting the ground and rolling into the depression. The lead rider's horse couldn't turn in time. It stumbled at the edge, throwing its rider forward into the dirt with a bone-cracking thud. The man didn't get up. The other 2 riders pulled up short, their horses dancing nervously at the wallow's edge. Katie lay still in the darkness, watching them through the grass. One man dismounted, checked his fallen companion, then looked directly at where she was hiding. He drew his pistol. The hammer clicked back, loud as doom in the prairie silence. The land stretched out before them, endless and unforgiving. The barn behind her collapsed with a thunderous crash, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky like dying stars. In that moment of distraction, Katie moved. She crawled through the buffalo wallow, using the depression for cover, putting distance between herself and the men who wanted her dead. The wet blanket dragged behind her, leaving a trail in the dust that any decent tracker could follow come sunrise. But sunrise was hours away, and hours might be enough. Her fingers found stones in the creek bed, sharp edges that cut her palms as she gathered them. Not much of a weapon, but better than bare hands against men with guns and rope. The prairie wind picked up, carrying the smell of burning wood and something else, something that made her stomach turn. The horses that hadn't made it out. 4 good animals dead because someone wanted her silent. Because someone wanted her land, or wanted her gone, or wanted whatever secrets they thought a 17-year-old girl might know about her father's dealings before he died. Part 2. Katie waited in the buffalo wallow until the men's voices faded, until their horses' hoofbeats became whispers in the distance. They'd search for her come morning with the sun to guide them, but right now darkness was her only ally. She crawled out slowly, every muscle screaming from smoke and fear in the desperate flight that had saved her life. The barn was a skeleton of glowing embers against the black sky, occasionally spitting sparks when a beam finally gave up its fight with gravity. She moved away from it, staying low, heading east toward the creek that fed the property. Her property now, though that piece of paper from the land office seemed worthless when 3 men could just burn you out and call it justice. The creek water tasted like mud and salvation. She drank until her stomach hurt, then soaped the blanket again and wrapped it around her shoulders against the prairie cold. November nights in Nebraska territory could freeze a person solid if they weren't careful, and Katie had left the burning barn wearing just a work shirt and trousers, no coat, no hat, nothing but what she'd been wearing when the world caught fire. Her boots were good, though, thick leather her father had traded for last year. They'd carry her the 30 miles to town if that's what it took. But town meant the sheriff, and the sheriff meant questions she couldn't answer. "Who burned your barn, Katie?" "Don't know, didn't see their faces." "Why would someone do this?" "Don't know, maybe they want the land." "Your father have any enemies?" "Everyone has enemies in Nebraska territory, Sheriff, you know that better than I do." The conversation would go nowhere because she truly didn't know who'd tried to kill her, and even if the sheriff believed her story, he couldn't protect her from men who struck in darkness and disappeared like smoke. She followed the creek north, moving parallel to the main trail but staying off it, using the cottonwood trees for cover. The moon was 3/4 full, bright enough to navigate by, bright enough to cast shadows that made her jump at every movement. An owl called from somewhere overhead, hunting. Katie understood the feeling. She was hunting too, hunting for answers, hunting for safety, hunting for whoever had decided she needed to die tonight. 2 hours before dawn, she found the line shack. It was barely more than 4 walls and a roof, built by her father and the previous owner as a shelter during roundup season. She circled it twice, making sure no horses waited nearby, no smoke rose from the chimney, no signs of occupation that might mean walking into another trap. The door hung crooked on leather hinges. Inside, darkness and the smell of old wood and mouse droppings. She felt along the wall until her fingers found the shelf where her father kept emergency supplies, a tin of matches, bless him. A candle stub. She lit it carefully, shielding the flame with her hand. The shack held exactly what she remembered. A pile of dusty blankets in the corner, 3 cans of beans with no labels, the metal rusting but probably still good, a canteen that needed cleaning, and in the rafters, wrapped in oilcloth, her father's spare rifle. JOE, she pulled it down with shaking hands. The Winchester 73 felt heavy and real, the metal cold against her palms. She checked the action. It worked smoothly, well-maintained even in storage. A box of cartridges sat wrapped with the rifle, 12 rounds that suddenly made her feel less like prey and more like something with teeth. Katie loaded the rifle, the mechanical clicking sounds comforting in the silence. She knew how to shoot. Her father had made sure of that, teaching her on rabbits and targets until she could hit what she aimed at, more often than not. Never thought she'd aim at a man, but tonight had changed a lot of things about what she thought she'd never do. She propped the rifle against the wall within easy reach and ate a can of beans cold, using her fingers because there was no spoon. The food sat heavy in her stomach, mixing with smoke residue and fear until she thought she might be sick, but she kept it down. Kept everything down, all the terror and confusion and rage that wanted to pour out. Crying wouldn't help. Screaming wouldn't help. What would help was thinking, planning, figuring out who wanted her dead and why. Her father had been a careful man, keeping records of every transaction, every deal, every promise made and kept. Those records were in the house, in his office, in the locked desk drawer where he kept important papers. If the men came back, they'd burn the house next. She needed to get there first. Dawn light was creeping through the shack's gaps when she heard horses. Kitty grabbed the rifle and pressed herself against the wall beside the door, breathing shallow, counting hoofbeats. 2 horses, moving slow, searching. Men's voices, low and urgent. She recognized neither voice, but the tone was clear enough. They were looking for something they expected to find dead and wanted to make sure it stayed that way. The horses stopped outside the shack. Katie's finger found the trigger, the metal warming under her touch. The door's leather hinges creaked as someone pushed against it from outside. She raised the rifle, centering it on the door frame, her heart hammering so loud she was sure they could hear it. The door swung open. Morning light flooded in, silhouetting a tall man in a dark coat. He stepped inside, and Katie almost shot him before she recognized the face. Lucas Kane, her father's old friend, and the only other rancher in this section who'd treated them with anything approaching decency. He saw her, saw the rifle pointed at his chest, and slowly raised both hands. Behind him, a younger man Katie didn't recognize kept his hand on his pistol. Lucas spoke quietly. "Katie, it's me. I'm not here to hurt you. Saw the smoke from my property last night. Rode over this morning to check on you. Found your barn burned and no sign of you anywhere. Thought you might have come here." She kept the rifle up, hands steady despite the trembling in her legs. "How do I know you didn't burn it yourself?" she said. Lucas shook his head. "Because if I wanted you dead, you'd have been dead 6 months ago when your father died and left you alone out here. I'm here to help, if you'll let me." Behind him, the young man shifted his weight. "That's my son, Danny. He's good. You can trust us." Trust was a luxury Katie couldn't afford anymore. But standing in a lined shack with a rifle and 12 bullets wasn't a long-term survival strategy either. She lowered the gun slightly, not all the way, just enough to show she was listening. "Tell me who burned my barn," she said. Lucas stepped fully inside, keeping his hands visible. "I don't know for certain, but I can guess. Your father found something 3 months before he died. Didn't tell me what, just said it could change everything, make us all rich or get us all killed." He was excited and terrified at the same time. Then he got sick, and whatever he knew died with him. Or so everyone thought. Katie's mind raced. Her father had been secretive those last months, spending long hours in his office, riding out to strange parts of the property, coming back with dirt under his nails and satisfaction on his face. She thought he was just working, just being the thorough man he'd always been. But if he'd found something valuable, then the men who burned her barn might be looking for it too. Might think she knew where it was, what it was, how to get to it, which meant they wouldn't stop until she was dead or they had what they wanted. Lucas seemed to read her thoughts. "You need to come back to my ranch," he said. "My wife will look after you. We can figure this out together." Katie shook her head. "I need to go back to my house first. Get my father's papers. If there's something worth killing over, the answer's in his records." Lucas frowned. "That's the first place they'll look." "Could be there already. Then I better hurry," Katie said, and pushed past him out into the morning light. Part 3. The ride back to the Morgan Ranch took 20 minutes, with Lucas and Danny flanking her like worried shepherds. Katie sat on Danny's horse while the young man walked, his pistol drawn and his eyes scanning the horizon for threats that might appear from any direction. The prairie looked peaceful in the morning sun. Grass waving in gentle breeze, meadow larks calling their territories, nothing to suggest that last night men had tried to murder her in fire and darkness. But Katie knew better now. The prairie only looked peaceful. Under that calm surface ran currents of violence and greed that could swallow a person whole. Her house stood untouched. The white paint her father had applied 2 summers ago still gleamed in the sunlight. The porch still held her mother's rocking chair. The windows were intact. Only the burned wreckage of the barn behind it, still smoking in places, suggested anything wrong. Lucas dismounted and tied his horse to the fence rail. "Stay here," he said. "Let me check inside first." But Katie was already moving, rifle in hand, boots hitting the porch boards with determined thuds. This was her house, her father's house, her mother's house, before the fever took her 5 years back. No one checked it for her. She went through the front door fast, sweeping the rifle across the entry hall, the parlor, the kitchen. Everything stood exactly as she'd left it yesterday morning. Dishes in the sink from breakfast. Her father's coat on the hook. The Bible on the side table bookmarked at Psalms where she'd been reading the night before the world caught fire. Lucas came in behind her, Danny covering the back door. "The office is upstairs," Katie said. "East room. Overlooks the barn. Or what used to be the barn." She took the stairs 2 at a time, Lucas following close enough to catch her if something went wrong. The office door stood closed. She tried the handle. Locked. Her father's key was on her neck, hung on a leather cord he'd given her the day before he died. "Use this if anything happens to me," he'd said. She'd thought he meant for sentiment, for memory. Now she understood he'd meant for survival. The key turned smoothly. The office opened to reveal her father's careful world. Desk against the window, papers organized in neat stacks, ledgers on the shelf, maps pinned to the wall showing the property boundaries and beyond. Lucas whistled low. "Your father was thorough." Katie went straight to the locked desk drawer, the one her father had made her promise never to open unless he was dead, and she was desperate. Both conditions met. She used a smaller key from the cord around her neck. The drawer slid open to reveal papers, deeds, surveys, and underneath it all a leather journal she'd never seen before. She pulled it out. The leather was worn smooth from handling, the pages thick and filled with her father's precise handwriting. Lucas leaned over her shoulder as she opened it. The first entry was dated March 1876. 8 months ago. "Found the cave today," her father had written. "Hidden in the North Canyon, behind the waterfall that only runs in spring. Inside the old Spanish markers. They were here, just like the legend said. They mined something here, something they thought worth dying for." Katie flipped through pages. More entries, more details. Her father had been methodical, documenting everything. Measurements, descriptions, sketches of symbols he'd found carved into rock. And then 3 pages from the end, the words that made her blood run cold. "Someone else knows." Saw tracks near the cave entrance today. Fresh, leading in and out. Need to be more careful. Need to protect Katie if this goes wrong. Lucas straightened, his face grim. He found a silver mine. That's what this is about. Those Spanish expeditions in the 1600s. They came this far north looking for precious metals. Most people think they never found anything worth keeping. But if your father discovered a working mine, or the remains of one, the mineral rights alone would be worth a fortune. Katie kept reading. Her father's last entry was dated 2 days before he fell ill, moving the journal and the map to safety. If anyone reads this, the answers are buried where the 3 rivers meet and the stones point west. Katie's mother rests there in memory. The writing was shakier than usual, as if he'd been hurried or frightened when he wrote it. Danny called from downstairs. Someone's coming. 3 riders moving fast from the south. Katie shoved the journal inside her shirt, grabbed 2 more ledgers that might contain useful information, and headed for the stairs. Lucas grabbed her arm. There's a root cellar, right? Access from the kitchen? She nodded. Go, he said. Danny and I will deal with whoever's coming. If they're friendly, we'll call down.
If we don't call, you go out the cellar's outside exit and run north to my property. Don't stop. Don't look back.
My wife Sarah will hide you until we can sort this mess out. Katie wanted to argue, wanted to stand her ground in her own house, but Lucas's face told her this wasn't the time for pride. She ran downstairs, through the kitchen, and pulled up the cellar door set into the floor. The ladder down was steep and dark. She descended quickly, pulling the door closed above her just as she heard the front door crash open. Men's voices, rough and demanding. Where is she? We know she survived last night. We saw tracks leading away from the barn. Lucas's voice calm and steady. Don't know who you're talking about. This is the Morgan place, Katie Morgan's place, but she's not here. Been checking on the property after we saw smoke last night. Looks like the barn caught fire somehow. Terrible accident. A different voice, harder edged. Wasn't no accident and you know it. That girl has something that belongs to our employer. We need to talk to her peaceful-like, but we need to talk today. Where is she? Katie crouched in the darkness of the cellar, surrounded by shelves of canned goods and preserved vegetables from last summer's harvest. Her hand found the rifle, checking by touch that it was still loaded and ready. Above her, boots thudded across the floor. Someone was searching the house, room by room. She heard drawers pulled open, furniture moved, the systematic destruction of her father's careful organization. Lucas spoke again. Your employer got a name? Maybe I can help sort out whatever business needs sorting. The hard-voiced man laughed without humor. You really want to get in the middle of this, Kane? You got your own spread to worry about. Your own family. Be a shame if something happened to them while you're playing hero for a dead man's daughter. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Katie knew Lucas had a wife and 3 children. Knew he was risking them by standing between her and these men. The weight of that knowledge pressed down on her, heavier than the journal hidden against her chest. Danny's voice came next, younger but just as steady. You threatening us in our friend's house? That's low even for hired guns. A scuffle. Sounds of struggle. Then a gunshot that made Katie jump so hard she nearly dropped the rifle. The cellar door above her head rattled. Someone was trying it, testing the lock she'd engaged from below. She raised the rifle, pointing it at the door, knowing that if they got it open, she'd have maybe 1 shot before they overwhelmed her. But the door held. The boots moved away. More voices, urgent now. Lucas said something she couldn't make out. The hard-voiced man responded with words that dripped violence. Then silence, followed by the sound of horses leaving at a gallop. Katie waited in the darkness, counting her heartbeats, giving it time. Finally, Lucas's voice filtered through the cellar door. Katie, they're gone. You can come up. But she didn't move. Not yet. How do I know you're alone? She called up. Because if I wasn't, the hard-voiced man answered, you'd already be dead or dragged out of there by force. Katie remained still. That's not Lucas. The man chuckled. No, it's not. Lucas is alive. Unconscious, but alive. My name is Henry Cole. Your father and I had dealings before he died. Good dealings, profitable for both of us. I'm not your enemy, despite what just happened here. Katie's finger tightened on the trigger.
You just threatened Lucas's family. You're searching my house.
You burned my barn. That sounds like enemy behavior to me. A pause. I didn't burn your barn. That was Frank Morris and his boys. They work for the other interested party in this situation, the ones who want what your father found and don't care who gets hurt in the process. I'm trying to keep you alive long enough to make a deal that benefits both of us. Your father promised me a partnership in whatever he discovered. I have papers to prove it, signed and witnessed. But those papers don't mean much if your dead and Morris gets to the mine first. Katie's mind raced. trying to sort truth from lies, trying to figure out who to trust in a situation where everyone seemed to want something she didn't fully understand. The journal against her chest felt like it was burning through her shirt, demanding attention, demanding she follow her father's final clue. Where the three rivers meet and the stones point west. Katie's mother rests there in memory. Her mother was buried in the family plot on the west edge of the property, where Willow Creek forked around a stand of old cottonwoods. Not three rivers, but maybe three branches of the same creek. The stones would be the grave markers her father had set up, plain granite with her mother's name and dates carved deep. If something was buried there, hidden in memory as her father wrote, that's where she needed to go. But first she needed to deal with Henry Cole, whoever he really was. Part 4. Katie made her decision in the darkness of the cellar, surrounded by the smell of preserved tomatoes and her own fear. "Mr. Cole," she called up through the door. "You say you have papers proving a partnership with my father. Where are these papers?" "Right here in my coat pocket," Cole answered. "Notarized in town 6 months back, witnessed by the land office clerk and the general store owner. Your father was a careful man, wanted everything legal and proper." Katie thought about that. Her father had been careful, obsessive even, about documentation and proper procedure. If Cole was telling the truth, there would be papers. But papers could be forged, witnesses could be bought, and careful men could still make mistakes that got their daughters nearly burned alive. She made her voice hard. "I'm coming up. If I see anything I don't like, if Lucas or Danny are hurt worse than you say, I'll shoot first and sort the truth out later." "Fair enough," Cole said. I'm backing away from the door. "Your friends are in the parlor, banged up but breathing. No permanent damage, unless you count pride." Katie unlocked the cellar door from below and pushed it open slowly, rifle barrel emerging first, then her head, scanning the kitchen for threats. Henry Cole stood by the stove, hands raised and empty, a tall man in a dusty brown coat with gray threading his dark hair. He looked like any other rancher or businessman in the territory, nothing special, nothing threatening. But Katie had learned last night that threats came wearing ordinary faces. She climbed out of the cellar, keeping the rifle trained on Cole's chest. Lucas sat in the parlor holding a cloth to his head, blood seeping through the fabric. Danny was on the floor beside him, conscious but moving slow, nursing what looked like bruised ribs. The house showed signs of the earlier search. Drawers pulled out, papers scattered, but nothing completely destroyed. Cole watched her with calm eyes that suggested he'd faced loaded rifles before and survived. "You want to see the papers," he said. It wasn't a question. Katie nodded. Cole moved slowly, reaching into his inside coat pocket and withdrawing a folded document. He set it on the kitchen table and stepped back. "Read for yourself." Katie approached the table without lowering the rifle, a difficult balance. She glanced at the document. It looked official enough, her father's signature clear at the bottom next to another signature that must be Cole's. The witness marks were there too, dated June 3rd, 1876. The agreement outlined a partnership to explore and develop any mineral resources found on the Morgan property, with profits split 60-40 in favor of the Morgan family. It looked legitimate. It also might be the best forgery Cole could commission in a territory where paper and lies were equally cheap. Lucas spoke up from the parlor, his voice thick. "Katie, that might be real. Your father mentioned something to me in June about taking on a partner. Said it was getting too big for him to handle alone, whatever he'd found. He was excited, said this man had mining experience and capital to invest. I never met the partner, though. Your father kept that information close." Danny added his thoughts. "Those other men, the ones who just left, they were serious about hurting us to get to you." "If Cole was working with them, why would they threaten him too? They didn't know he was here." Katie considered that. The timing was suspicious, but possibly explained by Cole arriving from a different direction, possibly even watching the house and waiting for an opportunity. She looked at Cole directly. "Who is Frank Morris, and who does he work for?" Cole's expression darkened. "Frank Morris is a hired gun, with a crew of equally unpleasant men. They work for Edmund Pierce, owns the big ranch 20 miles south of here. Pierce is looking to expand his holdings, and when he heard rumors about mineral deposits in this area, he sent Morris to investigate. Your father refused to sell, refused to partner with Pierce, refused everything. So Pierce decided to take it by force. The barn fire was meant to drive you off the land or kill you trying. Either way, Pierce ends up with access to whatever's here." Katie filed that information away, knowing it might be truth or might be misdirection. She needed to test Cole's knowledge. "What did my father find?" she asked. Cole met her eyes. He found evidence of an old Spanish silver mine, partially collapsed but still containing workable veins according to his assay samples. The location is hidden, he was careful about that, but he told me it was somewhere in the northern section of your property where the canyon runs deep. I've been searching for it on my own but haven't had luck. Your father was clever about hiding his tracks." Katie gave nothing away with her expression. The journal in her shirt felt warm against her skin, her father's final clue burning in her memory. She needed time to investigate that clue, which meant she needed these men gone. All of them, even the ones claiming to help.
Mr. Cole?
"I appreciate you showing me the papers. But right now I need time to think and time to tend my friends here. You understand?" Cole nodded slowly. "I understand. But understand this too. Pierce won't stop with one attempt. He'll come back, probably tonight, probably with more men. You can't defend this place alone. You need allies, and I'm offering to be one. Think about it, but think fast. Time's not on your side." He tipped his hat to her and walked out the front door, mounted his horse that had been tied to the porch rail, and rode south at an easy pace. Katie watched him go, rifle still in her hands, mind working through possibilities and plans. Lucas stood up slowly, Danny helping him. "That's quite a mess your father left you," Lucas said. Katie almost laughed. That's one way to put it. Lucas and Danny stayed for another hour, helping Katie board up the broken front door, checking the house for anything dangerous the searchers might have left behind, and insisting she couldn't stay here tonight. Eventually, Katie agreed to spend one night at the Kane Ranch, but only one. She needed to return and search her mother's grave for whatever her father had hidden there, but that would wait until dark when fewer eyes might see what she was doing. They rode to the Kane Ranch as the sun climbed toward noon, Katie on a borrowed mare, her father's rifle across her saddle. Sarah Kane met them at the door, a sturdy woman with kind eyes and flour on her hands. She took one look at Katie's soot-stained face and smoke-damaged clothes and ushered her inside without question. The Kane house was warm and loud with children, 3 young ones running and playing, blissfully unaware of the violence happening in their territory. Sarah drew a bath in a copper tub behind a privacy screen, provided clean clothes that fit reasonably well, and fed Katie soup and bread until she thought she might burst. It was the first normal moment Katie had experienced since the fire, and it made her want to cry more than any of the danger had. But she didn't cry. She ate and bathed and thanked Sarah for the kindness, then asked Lucas if she could look at his maps. He spread them across his dining table, showing her the full territory, his property and hers marked clearly. Katie studied the maps, memorizing landmarks, planning her route back to her mother's grave after dark. Lucas watched her, understanding in his eyes. "You're going back tonight," he said quietly. She nodded. "I have to. My father left something for me to find, and if I don't get to it first, Pierce or Cole or whoever else wants this land will tear everything apart looking for it." Lucas put his hand on her shoulder. "Then I'm going with you. You need someone watching your back." Katie wanted to refuse, wanted to keep Lucas and his family safe from whatever storm was coming. But she also wasn't stupid. One person could be ambushed easily. 2 people stood a better chance. They left the Kane Ranch 3 hours after sunset, moving quietly through the darkness, 2 riders heading toward the Morgan property from the north. The prairie was silent except for wind and the occasional coyote call. Katie led them along the creek, using the tree cover for concealment, avoiding the open ground where moonlight might reveal them to watching eyes. They reached the family plot just before midnight. Her mother's grave stood alone under the cottonwoods, the granite marker pale in the darkness. Katie dismounted and approached slowly, rifle ready, expecting ambush at any moment. But the plot was empty except for memories and the dead. She knelt by the marker. Her father had carved the stone himself, her mother's name and dates in a single line below. "She rests in peace where the waters meet." Katie had always thought that was poetic reference to heaven or the afterlife. Now she understood it was instruction. The 3 branches of Willow Creek met just north of this plot, forming a small pool before continuing east. The stones point west. Katie looked at the marker itself. It faced west, as most graves did, toward the setting sun. But her father had set 3 smaller stones at the grave's western edge, marking the corners. She started digging at the center stone. Part 5. The dirt came away easily, too easily for ground that should have been packed solid by months of weather. Someone had dug here recently, within the last few weeks. Katie's heart raced as her fingers found something solid wrapped in oilcloth about 2 feet down. She pulled it free, unwrapped it carefully. A metal box locked, about the size of a large book. Lucas kept watch while Katie worked at the lock with a knife blade. The mechanism was old but well maintained. It clicked open after a minute of careful pressure. Inside, more papers, more journals, and a small leather pouch that clinked with the sound of metal on metal. Katie opened the pouch. 6 silver nuggets tumbled into her palm, each about the size of a walnut, pure and heavy. Lucas whistled low. That's the real thing. High-grade silver ore. Probably worth $500 right there. Your father really found it. Katie set the nuggets aside and examined the papers by moonlight. More maps, more detailed than anything in the office. They showed the canyon system in the northern section, marked with her father's notes about tunnel entrances and collapsed sections. And there, marked with a red X, a spot labeled Main Chamber. Her father had written beside it, estimate 2,000 pounds workable ore remaining accessible without major excavation. Conservative market value $40,000. Small fortune by territory standards. Life-changing money for a girl who'd been subsistence ranching since her father died. But Katie knew that money meant nothing if she was dead. She repacked everything except one map, which she studied carefully, memorizing the landmarks and paths. Lucas leaned over her shoulder. That's rough country up there. The canyon's unstable, lots of rockfall, and it's a full day's ride from here. We'd need supplies, proper mining equipment, and more people we can trust. Katie nodded. All of which Pierce or Cole might already be arranging. We need to get up there first, stake a legal claim, document everything, and get protection from the territorial marshal if possible. Lucas frowned. Marshal's office is in Omaha. That's a week's travel there and back. You don't have a week. Maybe not, Katie said, but I have something better. She pulled out the last document from her father's metal box. A fully executed mineral rights claim, filed with the Territorial Land Office 6 months ago, signed and witnessed and stamped official. My father already claimed the mineral rights to this entire section. It's all legal and recorded. Whatever's in that canyon belongs to me, and anyone trying to take it is claim jumping under territorial law. Lucas grinned. Your father was smarter than all of them. He had everything lined up before he got sick. All you need to do now is get to that mine and prove it exists. Then you can bring in proper investors, do it right, and make enough money to never worry about anything again. Assuming Pierce doesn't kill you first. Katie reburied the metal box in a different spot, marking it mentally but leaving the grave looking undisturbed. They rode back toward the Kane Ranch, taking a different route, moving slowly and carefully. Halfway there, Lucas's horse shied at something in the darkness. Katie saw movement, then heard a voice she recognized. That's far enough, both of you. Frank Morris stepped into the moonlight, his pistol drawn and steady. Behind him, 3 more men materialized from the shadows, all armed, all looking like they'd done this kind of work before. Morris smiled without warmth. Thanks for digging that up for us. Saved us the trouble. Now, you're going to take us to that mine, or we're going to start shooting pieces off your friend here until you cooperate. How's that sound? Katie's hand moved toward her rifle, but Morris shook his head. Don't. You're fast, but not faster than bullets. Just be smart, tell us where the mine is, and maybe you both walk away from this. Katie considered her options, none of them good. She was outnumbered, outgunned, and protecting Lucas, who had a family waiting for him at home. But she also knew that once she led Morris to the mine, she and Lucas would be dead anyway. Witnesses were liabilities, and Morris didn't seem like the type to leave liabilities walking around. She made her voice calm. The mine's in the North Canyon, about 15 miles from here. The trails are tricky, though. People get lost up there all the time, or fall into ravines in the dark. You want to do this? We should wait until morning. Morris considered that. Nice try, but no. Pierce wants us wrapped up before anyone else starts asking questions. You'll guide us, and if we fall into any ravines, you'll be right there falling with us. So you better navigate real careful. They rode north in tense silence, Morris and his men surrounding Katie and Lucas like prison guards. Katie used the time to think, to plan, to watch for any opportunity. The canyon country was dangerous even in daylight, full of hidden drops and unstable ground. In darkness, it was deadly. Her father had always been careful up here, marking safe paths and avoiding the areas where old mining operations had weakened the rock. If she could lead Morris into one of those unstable areas, maybe the ground would do what her bullets couldn't. It was desperate and risky, but desperation was all she had left. They reached the canyon rim as the moon began to set. The darkness deepened, making navigation almost impossible. Morris called a halt. We'll wait here until first light. 2 hours at most. Katie, you and your friend dismount. Sit right there where I can see you. If either of you tries anything clever, the other one dies first. Understand? Katie understood. She and Lucas sat against a rock outcropping, hands visible, weapons taken by Morris's men. Around them, the canyon country stretched out in shadows and silence. Katie leaned close to Lucas, whispering so quietly he had to strain to hear. When the shooting starts, run north. There's an old prospector's tunnel about 200 yards that way, marked by 3 white stones. Hide there until it's safe. Lucas whispered back, "What shooting? What are you planning?" But Katie didn't answer. She closed her eyes, appearing to rest, but her mind was racing through her father's maps and notes. The main mine entrance was exactly where she'd lead Morris, but the approach crossed over an old tunnel system that her father had marked as completely collapsed and dangerous. The ground there looked solid, but wasn't. Heavy weight, like several horses and riders, might be enough to trigger a cave-in. It was a terrible plan with too many ways to fail. But it was the only plan she had. Dawn came slowly, gray light revealing the canyon's harsh beauty. Morris kicked Katie's boot. "Time to move. Show us this mine of yours, and remember, any tricks, and your friend dies screaming." They mounted up and continued north along the canyon rim. Katie led them carefully, marking landmarks, adjusting her path to bring them over the collapsed tunnel section she remembered from her father's maps. The ground looked normal, covered in dirt and prairie grass, nothing to suggest the honeycomb of empty space beneath. Morris rode close behind her, suspicious and alert. Behind him, his men spread out, giving themselves clear firing lines if needed. Lucas rode at the rear, his face set and calm, trusting Katie, even though he didn't know her plan. The ground changed subtly under Katie's horse. The mare felt it too, stepping more carefully, ears swiveling nervously. Katie kept going, her path taking her directly over what her father had marked as the main collapse zone. Behind her, Morris's horse followed. Then the world broke. The ground gave way with a tremendous crack, dirt and rock falling into darkness below. Katie kicked her mare forward desperately, the horse lunging away from the collapsing earth. Morris wasn't so lucky. His horse screamed and fell backward into the widening hole, taking Morris and 2 of his men with it. The sound was horrific, men and animals falling, rock tumbling, dust rising in choking clouds. Lucas spurred his horse away from the collapse. The 4th man, the one farthest back, stared in shock at where his companions had disappeared. Katie drew the pistol she'd hidden in her boot when they'd taken her rifle. It was small, a Derringer her mother had carried, only 2 shots. She fired once. The man fell from his horse, clutching his shoulder, his own pistol dropping into the dirt. Lucas retrieved the fallen pistol while Katie approached the edge of the collapse carefully. The hole was maybe 20 feet across, jagged and deep. Below, in the dimness, she could see broken rock and dust, movement, someone groaning. At least one of them had survived the fall, Katie called down. "Morris, can you hear me?" A pained voice answered. "My leg's broken. Get me out of here." Katie considered that. She could leave him, right away, let him die in the darkness below. Or she could do what her father would have done, what a decent person should do even for an enemy. She chose decency, though it sat bitter in her mouth. "Lucas and I will get rope. Don't go anywhere." Morris's laugh was more cough than humor. Real funny. "Just hurry up, I'm bleeding." It took 3 hours to extract Morris and the 1 man who'd survived the fall with him. The other 2 were dead, crushed by falling rock or broken by the impact. Morris's leg was badly broken, compound fracture with bone showing through skin. He needed a doctor quickly or he'd lose the leg to infection. Katie and Lucas loaded him onto a horse, tied him in place so he wouldn't fall off. The other survivor was in better shape, bruised and cut but mobile. Katie addressed them both as they prepared to ride back toward town. "You tell Pierce this is my land, my mine, my legal claim. He wants to dispute that, he can take it up in court like a civilized person. But if he sends more men after me, I won't be so charitable about getting them out of holes they fall into." "Understood?" Morris nodded weakly. "Message received. Pierce won't be happy, but he'll listen to reason once he knows you've got documentation and you're willing to fight for it. Girl like you, who survives fire and cave-ins and still shows mercy, that's someone worth negotiating with instead of killing." Katie didn't feel merciful. She felt tired and angry and scared, but she accepted the compliment if that's what it was. Lucas led the injured men south toward town while Katie finally continued to her father's mine. She found it exactly where the maps indicated, hidden behind a spring waterfall that flowed only part of the year. The entrance was narrow but passable, leading into a larger chamber where old Spanish mining tools still lay scattered among the rocks, and there, in the walls, veins of silver ore gleaming in her lantern light. Katie stood in the chamber, surrounded by her father's discovery, by the secret that had nearly killed her, by the fortune that would change her life forever. She thought about her father, working here in secret, planning and documenting and protecting his daughter's future. She thought about her mother, buried in the prairie with the map to this treasure hidden at her grave. She thought about the barn burning, the desperate flight through darkness, the kindness of strangers and the cruelty of greedy men. She thought about all of it, and then she got to work. There were samples to take, measurements to record, claims to document in her own hand. The mine was real, the silver was real, and Katie Morgan was alive to claim it all. Not bad for a 17-year-old girl who'd survived fire and came out the other side with a fortune and a future. Her father would have been proud. Her mother would have been proud. And Katie, standing in the lamplight with dirt under her nails and silver in her future, she was proud of herself too. The territory was harsh and unforgiving, but so was she, and that would make all the difference.